Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Rosé tasting. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'm delighted to be joined by Cecilia Pasqua this evening from Pasqua Wines in Italy, and we're going to be talking about 11 Minutes Rosé, and Delphine, lovely winemaker from L'Hostal in the south of France, and we're obviously going to be talking about L'Hostal Rosé. We also have two other wines, which is Jean-Luc Colombo Rosé and Rose Rosé, which I'm sure some of you know is my own wine. So before we kick off this evening, I'm just going to talk about some house rules. So if you can just bear with me, I'll go through those. Those are also posted on chat. So if anyone misses them, you can just check them out there. So all of our lovely guests are going to be muted during the presentation, but you're very welcome to use the chat function. Please feel free to ask lots of questions, because that's what makes the evening interesting, is when you guys start to ask questions of our lovely winemakers. And there's a Q&A at the end of the tasting, so don't worry if I appear to have missed your questions, because I tend to do a roundup, and sometimes I come back and do a few questions together. So my wonderful O'Brien's team in the background, Cora Jane and Lorcan and Aaron, are feeding questions and instructions to me the whole time. So please don't worry about that. We'll get the questions at the end if we don't get them during. To get the best view of the speakers, Cecilia, Delphine and myself, please choose speaker view, top right hand of your screen. This is a virtual tasting, it's being recorded. The customers are not being recorded, only the hosts are being recorded. So don't worry about having your video on if you want to have your video on, because we're not going to be recording you. Please remember to eat and drink throughout the tasting. We'll have a couple of minute break after the second wine, just to allow you to top up on wine and any, sorry, not wine and water, sorry, water. And any nibbles that you want to top up on. And there'll be a link tomorrow going out. So anyone that misses it this evening or wants to watch again, we'll send a link to it tomorrow. So thank you very much for bearing with me while I went through the housekeeping rules. So we're going to start off then. I always say that you can drink rosé at any time of the year, in any weather. And I was just explaining to Cecilia and Delphine that it's windy and rainy and cold in Ireland tonight. So we're about to hopefully prove that rule that you can drink rosé at any time of the year. It's not just for summer and it's not just for sunny weather. So before we kick into the wines, can I first go to Delphine from Domaine L'Hostal, and perhaps you can just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about the style of rosé that you were trying to make, Delphine, with the L'Hostal.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me tonight. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm the winemaker of Domaine de L'Hostal, and I'm working in this property for almost 6 years now. So I'm very proud of being part of the Cass family adventure, because it's really a very good adventure. It's very interesting to work there. The property is a big property, actually. It's about 150 hectares in the south of France. So it's located in Languedoc, close to the Spanish border. And so I said it's 150 hectares. It's 60 hectares of vineyard, and we have also 25 hectares of olive trees. And we've got this production of rosé wine based on the blend with Grenache and Syrah. It's two varieties that we find in the south of France, and most of the time you use them for red wine, but it's perfect to create a lovely rosé, fresh. And the rosé in L'Hostal is quite a modern rosé. I work on a light style of rosé, very crispy, very fresh and full of aromas. Something easy to drink, and as Lynne said, it's a type of wine that we can now drink all along the year. And indeed, we have more and more sales during winter and springtime, because it fits with plenty of type of food, so it's a very interesting wine. So as I said, it's a blend between Syrah and Grenache. It's about 50-50 of each. Okay. And I use most of the time the free run. That means that I pick the grapes and I put that in the press, and I just collect the juice, the what we call the free run, and it's the very clear and very pale juice that comes out of the press. After that, we start pressing, but at this time the juice is most of the time the juice is too dark, so I don't use it. That's why we have this very pale rosé like that.
Okay. And thank you, Delphine. We'll come back and talk a bit about the winemaking in a while. But Cecilia, could you introduce yourself now and just tell us a bit about the style of 11 minutes, Rosé? The style that you were trying. What is this? The fourth vintage or the third vintage? I'm trying to think of this wine of the 11 minutes.
This is the fourth vintage.
The fourth vintage. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So quite a new wine, really.
Yeah, well, in the family of Pasqua, because we have 95 years of history, I definitely say it's quite new. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, well, first of all, good evening, everyone, from finally sunny Verona. So I'm hoping tonight I can, send you some good sunshine and warm weather through also our, a glass of rosé, like Lynne rightly said, you can drink it all way around, all year round, and actually I think it brings a little bit of sunshine in the glass. So just a quick introduction about me. I represent the third generation of the Pasqua family, but my career in wine started in London now 15 years ago. And I got really passionate about wine while studying at WSET. I actually started the Master of Wine, which I haven't finished. Maybe I wasn't brave enough to finish the exam, but that's how I met Lynne, and it was actually an amazing experience, even to study it for a couple of years. I've been back in Verona since 2013 when I joined the family business. And I'm now responsible for part of the export market and also brand manager for one of our small estate. We are based in Verona, which is in the northeast of Italy. So it's the capital of wine, if you know the Valpolicella style of wine. So quite light and fruity wines, apart from, Amarone and Ripasso, which are very, very serious and big wines. And our rosé, which we are tasting tonight, comes from the southwest part of Verona. So if you can picture the map of the north of Italy, Verona is right in the middle between Venice and Milan. And we have quite a big lake next to the city, about, just over 25 kilometers from the city center. We are right on the Garda Lake. And in this part of the region, we grow, it's quite a famous part for winemaking. It's always been devoted to the production of red, but more than anything, in the region was very famous for rosé wine, because there was a Bardolino Chiaretto which was always produced in the area. But with 11 minutes, we decided deliberately to go outside the denomination of Bardolino, which is a DOC, as you are. Hopefully, you kind of know a little bit about the scale, the ladder of quality within Italian wines, but I can explain that later otherwise. So we went outside the denomination of origin because we decided to blend different varieties in order to obtain a really light style of wine, and a little bit more refreshing and elegant in a way than the Bardolino Chiaretto. So we decided to blend together with the Corvina, which is the king of Valpolicella and also of Bardolino, really the most famous native variety of our region. We blended also a little bit of Trebbiano di Lugana, which is a white grape variety, a touch of Syrah and Carmenère. And as you can see, the color is quite pale. I would definitely call it salmon, pale salmon. And we decided to keep it quite dry and elegant in order to have a wine that really can match very different style of food. You can drink it on your own, but also as an aperitif, but also together with, you know, salad or fish or prawns, very different dishes.
Okay.
Really.
Okay, thank you, Delphine and Cecilia, for your introduction. We're going to start, before we get the chance to taste your wines, we're going to start with the wine number 1 then, which is the Jean-Luc Colombo Le Pain Couché, and this is the 2020 vintage, so the latest vintage of this wine. And Jean-Luc Colombo is based in Cornas in the Rhone Valley in France. And the Rhone Valley is essentially split into 2 halves. You have Northern Rhone above, Cornas is essentially continental climate, and below Cornas is the Mediterranean. And you can see Cornas is absolutely on the border between Northern and Southern Rhone. And this is from the Southern Rhone, and in fact down into Mediterranean vineyards. And it's a blend of Syrah, Cinsault and Mourvèdre are the grape varieties. And I think the first interesting thing to note is the colour again is a very, very pale pink colour. And this pale pink colour is very traditional for the wines of Provence down in the south of France. And just as an example, to look at the colours of the 2 rosés, I've decanted rosé into 2 different decanters. So the one on the pale colour, because I can't work out if that's your left or right, is the Mediterranean Jean-Luc Colombo rosé, and the darker colour is my own rose from Navarra in Spain. And something that I think we're seeing in Ireland, and please feel free to taste the wines, start with the Jean-Luc Colombo. As I say, that's a blend of Syrah, Grenache and Mourvèdre. And this something we're seeing definitely is this fashion for a paler colour, but that's not always achievable depending on, depending on the wine style that the winemaker wants to make. So it's influenced by the climate, by the grape variety. It's influenced also by the legalities of a wine region, because in Navarra, you have to use the Saignée method of winemaking, which is the bleeding of the red grapes. But we certainly see a fashion for this pale colour. Are you finding the same in other markets, Delphine, that this pale colour is very popular?
Yeah, indeed. Languedoc rosé are getting paler and paler, very influenced by the Provence style. Yeah.
And Chechi, are you seeing that in other markets as well?
Yeah, definitely there's this trend coming also from Italy. For example, even regions that were historically making rosé wine, like the south of Italy in Puglia, they're now starting to make them much brighter in color. And, from all over, well, let's say the Bardolino Chiaretto in general was always quite pale, but I think the tendency now is even paler.
Paler again. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting thing, just if we taste it, the Jean-Luc Colombo, just to talk slightly about the grape varieties here. So Syrah is obviously a classic Rhone grape variety, and also a classic grape variety from the south of France in the Languedoc. The Cinsault, which is 20% of the blend, tends to bring a lot of fruit to a blend. And this Jean-Luc Colombo, I think you can definitely taste, is deliciously fruity and ripe. And Mourvèdre is actually known for tannin and a more savoury note. And I think that's quite interesting, because some roses now are going towards a bit more texture on the palate, and while they're dry and pale, they're also looking for texture. And I think it's interesting that there's 40% Mourvèdre in this Mediterranean blend, and I think that you can get a bit of texture on the palate Would you agree, Delphine, do you use Mourvèdre at all in any of your wines?
I have Mourvèdre indeed on my property. I use that for the reds.
Okay.
And as you said, it adds structure and this spicy character. And I think you might find that in Jean-Luc's Rosé.
Yeah, it is.
It adds complexity and this very light taste of spice. So it should be very interesting.
It is. And it has lots of lovely fruit as well, but it's got a bit of spice and a bit of texture on the palate, which is interesting. I think also, which I do think is a bit of fun, is also to decant rosé. I think we get ourselves very focused on decanting red wines, but I think where you've got some colour, such as a burgundy with a bit of age, or sweet wines, or indeed rosés, I think they can look really beautiful in a decanter in the summer. And I think, you know, that's just an example of how it can enhance drinking experience when you, you know, when you put it into a decanter. It's a bit of fun. So we haven't got any questions in yet. So I'm going to move on then to Rosé, which is my own rosé, which is, hopefully I can talk about this without making any mistakes. So basically this is a joint venture between myself and Tandem Winery in Navarra in Spain. It's 100% Grenache. And Delphine mentioned earlier that she is making the law style with a direct pressing method with very, very little skin contact. And this rosé, which actually is still quite pale when you see it in the glass, but it's darker than, say, the other wines that we're looking at this evening. And the way that this wine is made is it's called a Saignée method in France, but in Navarra, the legal requirement is that you use this method to make the wine, which is a bleeding of the red grapes, which naturally gives a bit more colour than what we call direct pressing, where the grapes have had very, very little time, the white juice on the red skins. So slightly richer colour, also dry, and this is made using it's wild yeast fermentation. It's 100% Grenache, and the vineyards are located in the northern part of the Yeri Valley, so quite close to the foothills of the Pyrenees, and on the other side of the Pyrenees is also the Atlantic. So it's got quite there is a bit of a maritime influence as well as influence from the mountains. That part of the Yeri Valley is they tend to harvest about 3 weeks after the rest of the area because it's just a bit cooler. So what you tend to get is, with the influence of the mountains, you tend to get a major difference between diurnal temperature, warm days, much, much cooler nights, very good for aromatic retention in the wines and very good for the retention of acidity. So I think when you taste Rose, you'll see that this wine has got very fruity. It's Grenache. Grenache is known for making very, very fruity wines, high acid and dry, but a lightness of fruit in the mid palate on the Rose. So just talk a bit more into the label design on this wine. So Rose, we're in Ireland, and lots of our customers will already know that Rose is the Scottish and Irish Gaelic name for rose. The design is based on arts and crafts, Rennie McIntosh design, and it's basically a Celtic type of design, I suppose is what you would say. The wine is non-intervention in terms of the wine making. It goes into concrete vats. It's wild yeast fermentation. This is actually, Chechi was saying that this is vintage 4 for 11 minutes. This is vintage 3 for a Rose, so still quite a new wine. And the other thing to mention about this wine is that it's vegan certified. So that's just something that we're seeing. More customers are interested in organic, more customers are interested in vegan wines. And in terms of food matches, because this wine's quite dry and it's good fruit, it tends to be very successful with food. So I would, obviously I've put some recommendations in the brochure there, but I would say, you know, anything from barbecues to salads to pasta. I always talk about tapas, obviously, because I love doing tapas, sharing platters in the house. I just think that's a really lovely way to eat in the summer. It's really, really well suited to food. That's a few thoughts on Rosie. I see a few questions coming in, so I'm just going to, how important is the year for Rosie? Well, why don't we answer that question, Delphine? How important is the vintage for Rosie? I can answer from a rose point of view, but why don't we talk about?
Usually we launch the rosé from the year because we want to have all this freshness and in the intensity of the character and the aromas. But for some rosé, it's very interesting to keep them in cellar for a couple of years. We actually open rosé from Le Stal. They were 3-4 years old. They developed different aromas and they have a different personality, and it was quite interesting. So it's possible to keep rosé in a cellar. Depends on what you want to do and what pairing you want to do.
Okay. And in terms of vintage for you, Ceci, how important has that been? I know this is your 4th vintage on this wine, but I mean, has there been something different every year that you've needed to take into account?
Well, there's always a variable. Weather is always a problem, can be always a problem for wine, obviously. What I can say is that luckily in the Lake Garda region area where we have the vineyards of this rosé, the temperature is always a little bit more moderate compared to the Valpolicella area itself. So that benefits for the kind of warmer winter and like a sort of even summertime, and so a very long ripening season, and therefore the wine tends to be quite fruity overall. But what I can say definitely for this vintage 2020, I've noticed a more upfront fruit character, perhaps because last year was actually a summer that was not as hot as the previous one. So, we had the kind of really good, even maturation, which allowed very good acidity and also fruit and aromas development. So overall, it was, I would say perhaps together with the first vintage, a very, very good vintage for the rosé. In general, what Delphine was saying about keeping the rosé, for this style of rosé, I never really recommend it because I like our rosé to express the maximum fruit character and really brightness. But for example, for another rosé that we have in the portfolio, that is actually possible. So I think obviously it depends on the style of rosé.
Okay. On the nose, basically, this is the 3rd vintage, and every vintage has been completely different so far. And what we are trying to achieve with this wine is that it reflects the vineyard, the grape variety, and indeed the vintage. So the first vintage we made, all wines have been technically dry, which means below 5 grams residual sugar. But the first vintage had 4.2 grams. It was quite detectable that it was a bit fruitier and a bit riper. The second vintage was lower residual, and the vintage was something like 1.3. So it's the dry vintage, but we're not really trying to do that in the sense it's all about the vintage itself. So this vintage was very warm. The grapes were harvested 3 weeks earlier, and what I'm seeing is more texture in the wine. The wine is drier. The acidity is high because we harvested earlier, and I think each year has been different, and that's what we are trying to achieve, a reflection of, because this is a small, we make 1 tank, so we're trying to genuinely reflect the terroir in every way, shape and form. The first year also we were very nervous because it was the first time we had made a rosé with wild yeast, such things that got the better of us in terms of this was a bit residual. Yeah, I think roses I can taste the previous vintage just to see the evolution, and I'm now happy to with some bottling. And I don't understand the question about the, if that could, I'm not quite sure what the, I'm not quite sure what the question is, if that wants to be asked. Yes, it is 14% here, and that was because I just made the intentional. The first next 14 and this is 14 and a half.
Same here, me too.
We harvested 3 weeks early. We it's the more alcohol.
Mi stanno scrivendo nella chat. You're breaking up. Sì.
One.
Lynne, you're breaking up. Sorry, we can't hear very much. Yeah, I think everyone is in trouble.
Haha.
Ma scusate, perché si è frizzata tipo. C'è un sacco di gente. C'è tipo tantissimo. Tipo
I'm not, I don't think that's going to work. Can you hear me now?
Centinaio.
It's getting
now
a bit better.
better.
It's better now, is it?
Yeah.
Anyway, to try and manage the alcohol a bit better, we're thinking of harvesting some of the grapes earlier, so that they're more acidity and slightly less ripe, and doing a bit of a blend from the same vineyard, but just trying to blend to manage alcohol a bit better. Depends on the vintage. We may not have to do it. So yes, is Rosie different in different vintages? Yes, it is. I think it is. So, let's see, there's another couple of questions. Okay. So, right, there are 2 poems by Cataclysm. Sorry, I should have, on Cecilia, do you want to talk about why don't we, before we have a break, why don't you explain the name and the background to the 11 minutes branding?
Sure, yes, absolutely. So the label, is in fact is a kind of dedicated to Catullo. So there is one of his most famous poem. The reason is because, as I mentioned, the Le Garda, Catullo was a Roman poet born in Verona. He spent most of his life in Rome, but his family was a very wealthy family, and they had a beautiful villa in Sirmione, which is at the south part of the Garda Lake, a sort of a little peninsula which goes inside the Garda Lake. Beautiful, beautiful spot. And so Catullo used to spend his summer there, and apparently he's met his lover, Lesbia, which was one of his, let's say, muse for many of his poetry. And Catullo was quite different type of poet for his age. I mean, age and when he used to live, because he was one of the first poets that started to write poems about his personal life rather than historical and classical heroes. And so it was quite of a, a breaking point into poetry during the Roman times. So because of the link, geographical link of the vineyards with the historical background, we decided to pay tribute to Catullo by having a part of one of his famous poems, Odietamo, on the label. And by the way, Odietamo in Latin means I hate and I love. And we kind of like this, two different sides of the coin, because, so many times in life we can find that we actually hate something that we used to love, and vice versa. Or, our other half, we love it so much, but sometimes we have, really difficult moments, and we can say we hate each other, but then we love each other. And you know, the fact that life is a continuous change and adaptation to that is also the beauty of it. And we believe also a glass of wine can bring such a beauty and such a pleasure, like hate and love.
Okay, well and I mean, it is very, very interesting design as well. And it's quite funny that both of them, and this wasn't done on purpose, but they've both got the circles.
Circle, yeah. Exactly. Another thing about the circle, if you look through on the back label, there is a picture of a woman, and that is in fact the picture of Lesbia, who I was saying before is the muse inspiring many of Catullo's poems.
Interesting. And yeah, someone's just saying that they love the inspiration on the design, the label design. Okay, well, listen, we'll take a couple of minutes break just to allow people to top up on any water or biscuits or nibbles that they need to get. So we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Okay, sure.
You managed to refresh your water and nibbles. So I have seen some questions coming in, and we're not going to miss those questions. I think Delphine, oh no, sorry, we're going to continue on in the 11 minutes as the next one in the book when Cecilia joins us. I'd be interested to hear what people thought of their food and wine matches tonight. If anyone wants to pop that up on the chat, I'd be very interested to hear what you thought. So we'll move on then to the 11 minutes, and this is obviously Celia's wine, and she's talked a bit about the label design. But would you talk to us now about the different grapes in the blend and what you feel each grape brings to the blend, Celia?
Sure. Okay, so yes, it's a blend of 4 different grapes. One of which is Corvina, really the king of both Valpolicella, but also the area of the Bardolino and Garda Lake. Corvina is naturally a grape that is quite pale in color, unless it goes through the appassimento process, which is quite a method widely used in the region. It has high acidity and it has a lot of fruit character, bringing like really nice dark red fruit and cherry character to the wine. Then we have Trebbiano di Lugana in this case, which is a white grape variety from the south part of the lake. This obviously being a white grape adds freshness, acidity, and also this kind of delicate peachy and apricot aromatics. And then we have Syrah for about 15% of the blend that adds a little bit of body. Like you said before, Lynne, for Syrah, it also adds fruit character and a touch of spice. And then we have a 10% of Carmenère, which is a French / Chilean variety, not so well known in Italy, but actually we discovered that it was quite widely planted in the late 70s, 1980s, because it was wrongly thought to be Cabernet Franc. So there is some of this Carmenère in the area, which naturally for this herbal and quite tannic structure brings also, a good structure and also some sort of character to the wine. No, it gives a little bit of linearity and how can I say, like a little bit of verticality in a way, like this really good elegance and style. So overall, it's a dry rosé. There is quite a good upfront aromas of fruit in the nose. I really get this kind of peachy and apricoty, a little bit of cherry and a little bit of almost like a flowery hints on the nose. And then in the palate, though, is quite clean and dry, because we wanted really to have a dry rosé as a result, and a wine that could be versatile for very different type of occasion. Yeah, so this is the...
And can I just ask a question about Carmenere? Because in Chile, it quite often has a slightly menthol, a slightly minty character, the Carmenere. And you could see maybe why it could be confused with Cabernet Franc, because Cabernet Franc always can have a touch of greenness as well. Is that something, is that how it ripens in the Veneto, or how does it present?
Yeah, I think it doesn't have here that kind of minty character that we find very much in Chile. It's slightly, it's a bit like the Merlot in Italy. It is less bright, you know, less plummy. It's a little bit more austere, a little bit kind of soft-spoken. So yeah, I would say the same goes with Carmenere. Perhaps, you know, we don't have that you know, diurnal shift that you have in Chile, and we have yeah, slightly warmer kind of climate during the maturation season. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of the sort of, do you think it's the Carmenere that's bringing, because the 11 minutes has got quite a, it's got lovely fruit, and then it's got this slightly, it's got a very elegant line running through it, particularly with the acidity. Do you think that that's coming from the Carmenere grape, or do you think it's coming from any of the other grapes?
I think it's more coming from, because 50% of it in the end is Corvina. And I think Corvina has actually a good level of acidity. So I think overall the backbone is given by the Corvina. 25% is Trebbiano. Only 10% is Carmenere. So definitely it adds something, but I think the backbone is given by the Corvina, because Corvina is still quite an important, meaning that it's got character, no?
Yeah, and it is the local grape of the Veneto, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's obviously the main part of the blend because it's the local indigenous grape. That so it's very true to its Venetian roots in terms of its.
Yes, we wanted to be quite, you know, true to the origin, but without being obliged to follow the rule of the DOC, for example, which only allows the red varieties, no, of Corvina, Rondinella, and so on. So therefore, we went outside the denomination. In fact, 11 minutes is an IGT wine. And, but for this reason, we are able to experiment with the variety, not just Corvina and
And that's quite interesting to step outside of the wine regulations. I think, given that Bob Dylan is 30 this week, I think I'm allowed to quote him and say that one of his famous quotes in one of his songs is, "To live outside the law, you must be honest." I think you have, you've stepped outside of the law, and you've been very honest in the terms of the blend that you've put together and everything. But this has been a very successful wine, hasn't it? Even though it's not within the regulations, you've gone your own way, you've crafted your own of the Veneto, and it's been
no, definitely it was quite a brave move, but I think thanks to our you know, friends and neighbor, the French people, so there's been thank you. But I think we kind of got inspired by the success of French Rosé, because, you know, they're always so in a way inspiring for the marketing, packaging and everything. And we thought, why don't we do the same? No, we have the climate, we have the variety. Why can't we experiment with the blending and be a little bit more outrageous with the packaging as well? So we decided to use it. So we decided to use a bottle which wasn't really used for wine before. It was a gin bottle. We used the cork as a closure because we thought, you know, rosé wine, you can drink it in the park, you can take it to a, I don't know, ride on the boat, and it's easily open without a bottle opener.
And you can refill it with water as well.
Yes, exactly. Actually, I always encourage that.
Yeah. No, it's very nice packaging. So I'm going to move on to Delphine now, and then to move on to the Lost Style. So
Yep.
we haven't mentioned up until now is that Lost Style, and I'm sure lots of our customers in Ireland know this, but the main Lost Style is owned by Chateau Lynne in Coyle, and obviously
Exactly.
the Irish connection between Chateau Lynne and Lost Style. Sorry, between Lynne and Ireland. So I think there's lots of Irish people who say that Lynne is their favourite red wine. So, but before
I wonder why.
Yes, me too.
But before we move on to talk about Lost Style, before we talk about the wine, it would be quite interesting to hear you talking about maybe, I'm sure that the investment is second to none and that you don't have to worry about the quality of what you're doing in vineyards or the quality of what you're doing in the cellar, because you've got, you know, Jean-Charles and Jean-Michel who are dedicated to the quality, and it's just they bought this beautiful property in the Languedoc, and it's just interesting to hear what it's like to be managed by a huge Bordeaux chateau when you're in France.
It's a lot of pressure. No, I'm joking. They're actually coming to visit me tomorrow night.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's nice.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Both of them, Jean-Michel and Jean-Charles. So I'm quite happy to have them in the vineyard with me. It's a bit of history, actually, this property, because back in late 90s, Jean-Michel was looking for a property in the south of France. So he found, he traveled around and found a couple of appellations quite interesting. But when he visited in La Livinière, 2 domains, actually, he thought that's where there is a good potential and we can do something very interesting here. So he bought the properties in 2002 and the winery in 2003. So it's been now 18 years that we run Domaine de l'Hostal. And it was quite a challenge because the vineyard was in very bad conditions. And we had to renovate it for almost 5 years, pulling out the vineyard and replanted it. So we replanted that in mainly Syrah. So today the vineyard is about 65% of Syrah planted, and a bit of Carignan, which is the cousin of Carmenère, and Grenache and Mourvèdre. And a bit of white, because we have a small production of white wine with Viognier, Roussanne and Marsanne, the style of wine that we make in the Rhone Valley, typical varieties that we find in the Rhone Valley. Anyhow, so the vineyard now is about 15 years old, mainly, and it was a target to produce 2 appellations, the Cru La Livinière and the Minervois. So they're red wines. And about 10 years ago, they decided to create a new wine, which is the Rosé. So now we're working hard on the Rosé to make it very popular and in the style that a lot of people want to drink, meaning it's light, fresh, crispy, that suits any type of food, and we can drink all around the year. So before me, the previous technical director started to work on Syrah and Grenache, which is the 2 varieties we've got on the property. Why those 2 varieties? Grenache, because it's a very pale color, and it has this very interesting expression with this subtle character of strawberry and very round mouth. So it's very interesting to have that in the blend. And the Syrah, And as Cecilia mentioned, it's like giving the structure of the wine and adding a lot of complexity. The problem with Syrah is the color that we have to manage. So it's very tricky when we have the grapes in the winery, because we have to collect the free run when it's really pale, and when it turns too dark, we have to cut it off. So it's a lot of time under the press to taste the juice and compare the color, because it's a question of minutes. Otherwise, it's too dark and it's ruined. So it's a question of balance also, because when it's too pale, you don't have enough aromas, but when it's too dark, you have too much color. So that's the job of the winemaker, to find the right balance between all those components. So it's 50-50 most of the time, 50 Grenache, 50 Syrah. And I think it goes well together. Yeah.
It's delicious. And tell me, do you find, because this is what we find in Navarra with Rose, that if we go too pale, we don't get enough aromatics or fruit. It's a very delicate balance between not being too dark color, but also having enough fruity character on the palate and a good aroma profile.
Exactly. Yeah. We have to be very, very aware of this balance and the extraction, because all the aromas and the color are in the skin. So it's hard to extract one without too much of the other.
I know, and I mean, certainly, as I mentioned earlier, these are two of our most popular rosé wines that we sell in Ireland for our customers. And I think that the styles of both of them are really suitable for this market, because they both have fantastic fruit. They've got the lovely pale colour, but very unique flavour profiles in their own right. They're very characteristic of the area that they come from. And that's a lot of rosés that are very pale, but they actually don't have enough fruit, or they don't show their terroir, or they don't show the grape varieties. And I think that these two absolutely do. You've got the personality of the wine as well as the style and the terroir balance. Everything is beautifully balanced, really. I'm just going to look at a couple of questions just to make sure that we're not missing anything. So someone was mentioning that the 11 minutes smelled like elderflower. I don't know what the name for that in Italian is.
Sambuco.
Oh,
Yes,
Sambuco.
actually,
Okay.
you know, we don't have Sambuco very often here in Italy. It's not really something that we drink very often, but I can definitely picture that in my mind. Now that is said that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then peaches also on the 11 minutes, and someone saying that they love drinking 11 minutes in the park. I think that sounds like a plan.
Right, yeah.
Someone asking about the significance of the name of the 11 minutes.
Sure, yes, this is something actually that I haven't mentioned before when talking about the label. So the name 11 minutes was actually inspired also by the winemaking technique, because as Delphine was saying, the importance of the contact, you know, with the juice and the skin. In our case is very, very short. So when the grape arrive at the cellar, we run a gentle press run for 11 minutes. And that inspired also for the name of the wine itself, because we found that, you know, this was enough time to really give the color to the juice, which then decant for about 24 hours before fermenting. And then fermentation kicks off with the selected yeast. We ferment the variety separately, and then we do the blending, which then basically stays on its lees for about a couple of months before being bottled. So this is the name was actually inspired by the winemaking.
Okay, it's a good name. So then we have a couple of other questions here. difference between vegan and non-vegan wines. I'm going to give that to Delphine, actually, since she's the winemaker.
Yeah. So the question is vegan.
The difference between a vegan wine and a non-vegan wine.
Okay. We of course to pilot the color and the aromas, we need to add fining agent. And in the past, we were using some fining agent from animals, which we don't do anymore. It's all vegetal, coming from vegetal, so no animal products in the winemaking anymore. And I think more and more wineries are working towards this way. So considering that yeast are something alive, I don't know if we consider that we work with them or not. But for our production,
it's actually quite hard as well to make a rosé wine or a white wine with, there's a product that's used often for fining, which gives clarity to the wine, is called isinglass. And that's a product that you need to avoid if you want to be vegan or vegetarian in your winemaking, because it's basically a fish-based product from shellfish, tiny crustaceans. And that's what's been why most white or rosé wines have been non-vegan or vegetarian in the past. But there's very good alternatives to that now. As Delphine says, lots of wines are definitely moving towards that. Not everyone is certified, but we felt with Rose it was important to be certified and put it on the label. It's harder also with red wines sometimes because they're using egg whites to fine, and say for example in Bordeaux, so they make it vegetarian but not vegan for that reason. So more and more wineries are moving towards non-animal based products in the sense of even just egg whites. People are looking for alternatives. So thank you for that question. It's an interesting one. The next one I'm going to come to is that a lot of people judge rosé wines based on colour, thinking that dark rosés are sweet. Can you discuss? So I'm going to give that to Celia, that one. Are darker rosés sweet, or why do people think they're sweet?
Well, I think it's a little bit in the mind. There's a perception that I find personally a lot when I travel, or when I used to travel, because I haven't traveled for over a year now. But I mean, traditionally, when I used to host tasting and I came across rosé wine, in general, darker rosé were immediately associated with, for example, white Zinfandel. So like a kind of rosé, which is obviously not dry. But if I think of, historically, Italy has been making rosé for hundreds of years. No, maybe not hundreds, but quite a few years. But even though they are dark, I'm thinking of, for example, Cerasuolo in Abruzzo, or Pulian rosé wines. They are dark in color, but they are not so sweet after all. But it's true that the tendency and the fashion is actually moving to paler color, because the perception of the consumer is that pale rosé it's associated to a drier style. So and I think perhaps it's even more beautiful to look at. I think it's something that it's also related to how it actually looks in the glass. But and also the perception, because after all that's important. And so as we discussed at the beginning, in most markets where we sell, I mean, we export to over 50 countries. The style of rosé that is mostly required is pale, and I think it's because of this perception of historically linking a rosé wine to a particular style, because that was mostly what was available back then.
And what's your view on that, Delphine, in terms of people thinking that, see, in France, people would have known things like Rosé, d'Anjou, and
C'est ça.
d'Anjou, and those wines to this day have still got quite high residual sugar.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
those are a darker colour because they're made from very thick-skinned grape varieties such as Cabernet or Cabernet Sauvignon. So I suppose in France people do associate a darker with the sweeter wine.
Yeah, I think historically it's for us in France it's the Cabernet d'Anjou, which is quite dark, and with, I think in the appellation it's 18 grams of sugar, so it's
high.
It's quite high, and it's everywhere in our mind that a dark rosé would be sweet actually. So
and to give people a comparison, 18 grams residual sugar in a Rosé d'Anjou or a Cabernet d'Anjou versus L'Hostal, which is what?
L'Hostal is less than 0.4 gram of sugar.
Yeah.
So it's close to zero, it's dry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing in my head with rosé wines being sweet, I was thinking about Mateus Rosé, for example, from Portugal, which is the first rosés ever launched. It was actually launched in 1992, believe it or not. And it was extremely popular in, the 70s. And it also had quite high residual, and it was also quite dark in color.
Yeah.
So I think historically darker roses were sweeter. I think that's the kind of, that's how we're answering that question anyway. Thank you for the question. So I've got someone here saying, Delphine, I have a happy memory drinking L'Hostal in a small restaurant in Béziers after a long hot train ride from Barcelona.
Good on you.
Okay. In vegan wine are no pesticides used. Well, lots of winemakers are moving towards organic production or sustainable production, which means that they would be absolutely reducing their use of chemicals in the vineyards. And that would we're quite hot on in O'Brien's, that we are very much trying to work with producers who are working as sustainably as possible. But many producers now really are not using pesticides in the vineyard at all. And they would be using things like pheromone confusion and so on to try to avoid any instances with pests in the vineyard. But Delphine, why don't you talk about that in the south of France? Because it's maybe not such a problem in such a warm region, pests.
Yeah, but still, there is problems with any type of butterflies or exactly. For us in L'Hostal, we don't use herbicides anymore, so we always work with mechanical solutions. Sorry. And as you mentioned, we use also the confusion sexuelle, so the pheromone solutions to avoid all those butterflies. So basically, we are respectful for the nature and the environment, and we are working hard towards this way. So I hope soon will be certified. Sorry, and we can put that on the label on the bottle.
Okay, thank you for that. And what about with you guys in terms of the use of pesticides and herbicides in the vineyard? It's a cooler climate, so obviously you've got mildew and pressure of those things. But in terms of pesticides, what would you be doing to?
Yes, so we are moving more and more towards that direction. Obviously, considering that it's not just our vineyards of own property that we look after, but we have also a number of vineyards that we control. But we are moving more and more towards that direction, certainly.
Okay.
For example, definitely moving towards the use of less or none herbicides, and also pheromones we use a lot. Our climate tends to be quite humid because in summer it's very hot, and we have lately we've had huge thunderstorms, so it's not unusual to have attacks of powdery mildew, and similar problems. So, but we know we tend to use coppers as a main solution for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, but we are obviously being more and more aware of being sustainable, and also the what we do in the cellar. You know, like. For example, we don't use isinglass for any refinement of the wines, and yeah, so we are working towards certification sooner, very soon. Yeah.
Thank you. So then we've actually talked a bit about Rosé d'Anjou, so we managed to preempt that question. The vegan we've talked about. Delphine, why don't you say Chateau Lynch on the label?
We actually have the famille Caz, and not Chateau Linge. So, but the family is mentioned.
Yeah.
Yes, and you will find exactly the same thing. Famille Jean-Michel Caz on the Linge bottle now. So it was quite moved.
Yeah, I think just speaking to Florent and Jean-Charles, very keen that each of your properties, be Domaine de Seneschal or Domaine Lost, stand on their own 2 feet on the merit of their own quality of what's in the bottle.
Yeah.
They don't want to be, if you like, they want the wine to stand on its 2 feet and on its own to be respected for what they're doing in their own right, and I think that makes sense. So
yeah, sure.
In fact, that's the way quite a lot of the if I take another example, we work with Chateau Lafite, and they don't mention that with their other wines anymore. Say, for example, Los Vascos from Chile or Bodegas Caro. They don't want us to mention Chateau Lafite when we're talking about wines. Nor do Jean-Charles or Jean-Michel, but we continue to mention it anyway ourselves. In fact, they're moving away from talking about it because similarly we want the wines to be recognised for their own merit. Okay. What are your thoughts about competing against celebrity rosés? I'm going to give that one to you first of all, Chechi.
Well, that's a good question, actually. I think, well, you know, we can't be afraid of that because I was reading Wine Spectator yesterday, and apparently all players in the NBA are also, you know, loving wine, and they'll start to make wine soon. So I don't think it's ever gonna stop.
No.
So I think in a way they're helping celebrity wine. They're helping making wine in a way, I'm not saying more accessible, but that they bring in more awareness to the wine category, especially rosé. If you think about it, a few years ago, rosé was only like a, you know, like a small category, and it's been growing a lot due to the success of Miraval Rosé, because it's bred an Angelina Jolie property, or I don't know, whatever it was. I don't know if it's still theirs, but so I think in a way it's really bringing more awareness to the category.
No, I think that's an interesting point. It actually is. And then there's a question about residual sugar, and it was 0.05 grams, and that's actually not per bottle, it's per litre.
Per litre.
So in Lost Isle, there's less than 0.05 grams in your bottle. So from that point of view, it's very low sugar. So Delphine, I'm going to ask you this question. What's the importance of the percentage alcohol in the production of rosé wine?
Well, for rosé, it's directly linked with the freshness and the level of acidity. I would pick my Syrah and my Grenache around 12.5. It's almost always the same because I want to keep all the fresh expression and a high level of acidity. And if I wait and the level of sugar and of course the level of alcohol will get higher, I will change everything. The style of wine, the aromas will be different, the level of acidity will drop, and we'll have something a bit too flat and not as interesting as what we do at around to 12.5 to 13. So it's linked, directly linked with the expression and the style of rosé we want to do.
And basically that everything is in balance, the acid, the alcohol, the fruit, everything is just perfectly balanced, really, is the important thing.
Exactly.
It's a delicate balancing act when you're making the wine, isn't it? As you were saying, you're under the press and 2 minutes can make or break the rosé for that year. It's that, you know, sort of level of attention to detail that is the difference between getting it right and getting it wrong, really.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very precise work, actually. Yeah, because you work with different components.
I didn't realize that Florent was actually dialed in, because I see that he's just said something too.
I didn't know either.
He's been spying on us, Delphine, and we were.
Yeah. Hello, Franck.
I'm wondering how your price points are determined across the 4 rosés. I'm going to answer that if you don't mind. So basically, what happens is the wineries give us the price of the rosés, which is called ex-cellar, direct from the cellar. And what we do in O'Brien's is we always try to pass on the best value that we can to our customers. And that's one of the reasons why we do buy wines locally in Ireland, absolutely. And we are supplied by good Irish suppliers for certain wines. But the vast majority of what we do is what we call direct import, direct from the wineries. And for us, that's important because it gives us exclusivity on the wines, which is really important for us in terms of our staff and our customers. But it also allows us to have a very direct relationship with our wineries. As you can see tonight, we're obviously here with two of our winemakers here this evening. But also it gives us an advantage on price with the fact that we're going directly into market. We're buying straight from the wineries. So it means that there's a chunk of margin there, and we tend to pass on that saving to our customers absolutely as best we can. Rosie is also particularly well priced in O'Brien's, because when we started 10 years ago to focus on Rosie, it was a very small category and there was very little interest in it. And I remember when we first talked about it, we decided that we would try to offer really good value on the rosé wines to try to get an interest going in this category. So as a business, O'Brien's invested in that margin. So we don't make, I don't mind telling you, we don't make as much money on the rosé as we make on other wines, because that category was really tiny in the beginning. But it's been so that we now, to ensure that we continue to success, so we've continued to invest in that category, and we pass on very, very good value prices on rosé. The good thing is that I guess we run the promotion from May till August, so it's a limited period of time, which means we can still afford to do it. But we're also helped by our wineries who give us good prices, because that's my job, to try and persuade people to give me good prices. The prices are based fundamentally on what the winery is selling the wine for, but then we try to pass on good prices. I hope that answers the question. It's a bit long-winded, but okay, we love Lake Garda and Bardolino area. Next time we get to travel, we'd love to visit. Is there a Pasqua visitor center?
Yes, absolutely. There is. So, please get in touch, and as soon as the borders reopen and we are able to travel, you are all welcome to visit.
Okay. Linda from Class of Wine, who runs online wine courses, I should mention to everyone, she's on Twitter. If you want to look up her wine courses, she runs great courses. Kylie, Brad and Angelina, Linda thinks have all helped, and I think they have. And plus to also come to Lake Garda, which is fine. And then, but for consumers, not just buy them and understand what's behind a wine because of the great, the store, the region, winemakers, etc. Yes, so what Linda's just saying, she's endorsing that, what she said above, that they've helped, but also to understand what's behind the wine, the grape, the region, and I think hopefully we've talked a bit into that tonight.
Sure.
Celia's saying, Paul, get in touch the next time you're in Lake Garda. Okay, Sandra, to everyone. Oh, now this is a really awkward question. Because we've got to say what our favourite Rosie is outside of our own wine.
Oh gosh.
Sandra, that's quite mean.
Oh my God. Our
Okay.
favorite rosé outside of our own.
Oh, well,
Lynne, you go first.
I'm going to start. Okay, so I've got to say that I love rosé wine. I've got to say that to begin with. And I personally typically enjoy a traditional Provence rosé. So dry, quite, Mediterranean, garrigue type flavors, a bit of salinity if the wine is, any kind of coastal influence really. And I just think that's on a hot summer's day. I think that's just perfect in the garden with salad.
Oh.
Said that, I also like that's got a bit more texture and flavour and a rosé that tends to go better with food, which I think is more my own rose style. Just something with a bit more texture, a bit more weight, and can work really, really well with food. But I think in general, rosé for me is such a versatile wine style. And as long as it's not sweet, I will happily give it a go, wherever it's from. In fact, we've got a Greek rosé on the way in just now, which is made from Agriaritico. It's just landed, and I'm quite excited by that this year because it's got quite an interesting volcanic soil based vineyards, and it's just volcanic vineyards soil, and it's basically quite lean and quite mineral and quite stony. So I think that's quite an interesting one. Listen, I'm useless. I can never say my favorite wine because there's too many. That's what I do every day. I buy wine. So go on, Chetty. You say your favorite rosé.
Well, it's difficult, like you said. I definitely like dry rosé. I think one of the first rosé that I've ever drank when I was in London, and then I discovered, kind of made me aware of the rosé world, was a Sancerre rosé. So even though I don't drink enough of those because you don't find them in Italy, I probably would that would be my pick if I was drinking a rosé outside of Italy and outside of the usual kind of Provence, which is in Italy. It's actually now more and more available.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would probably go for Sancerre or maybe a kind of classic Provence or. Lately I've drank a really interesting rosé made out of Nebbiolo. Very unusual because you don't really drink many of rosé out of Nebbiolo, and it was actually sparkling, and it was really good.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. From the Barolo grape then. Exactly.
But in the south part of the region of Piedmont. Yeah.
Interesting. And Delphine, your favorite rosé outside of Lost Island? Remember, Florong is listening.
No other rosé then. Well, as I'm a winemaker and a technician, I like rosé because it's a challenge for a winemaker, really. And I remember this rosé from Provence. I can't remember the name of the domain, but it was 100% Grenache, and it was so pale, and it was actually slightly violet. And I thought, well, it's there will be no expression on this wine. I never tasted a rosé with so many aromas. It was incredible. And technically, I was wondering how the hell they will do that. So I tried to do the same, really, with my Grenache, to do something very plain with a concentration of flavors. And yeah, I would like to do that.
Delphine, this is for you. Someone's asking about, you mentioned about the free run juice at the beginning from the press. They want to know what happens to the rest of the juice.
To the rest of the juice, well, actually, when it starts to get too dark, I stop the pressing and empty the press, and I will end up with the reds. Yeah, I pump all that in a tank and I'll make a red with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Someone's asking, is dry rosé pale, but not always really. There are pale roses that are sweet, and that comes back to the white Zinfandel style. So it's more about skin contact and the color of the wine, but it's not pale roses or sweet or dry. Sorry, there are sweeter pale roses. Okay, someone's saying, wonderful evening, ladies. Thank you so much. Really interesting. Can you tell us what the plans are for the future? Go back to you on that one, Chechi, because I know you've got plans that you were talking to me about today on Rosé.
Yes, actually, yes. Yeah. So interestingly enough, we launched another rosé this year, following the success of 11 Minutes. We decided to embark on another project of rosé, so from the same property, but smaller, very much smaller production, because we selected the grapes for this other rosé. And it's only 3 grapes. So for the new rosé, we are not using the Syrah, but we are only using Corvina, Trebbiano, and Carmenère. And we are using a little bit of oak fermentation in this case, because we wanted to make a wine which was a little bit more restrained in a way, more of a sort of a food wine. Although 11 Minutes can be a food wine, we believe that it could be even more, with a little bit more of an elegant finish, of a bit more austerity in the style. So
that would be interesting. I know I've tried it, but I know there's another bottle on the way to try, so I'm quite excited to try.
So yeah, it's a smaller production, like a sort of a limited edition of 11 Minutes. Yeah, only in a small kind of scale.
Okay. And Delphine, have you plans to do any other type of rosé? Are you sticking with the L'Austral as it is?
Yeah, we stick on the Austral rosé. Yeah.
Okay. And me, Rose is already a limited production as well, to use Chechi's words. My next plan is an Albarino, which will be here hopefully in the summer. And that's coming from Galicia in Spain. So I'm looking forward to
that. I love Albarino. Nice.
Some really love tonight. Thank you. Is it true that some roses are a mixture of red and white? Yes, and that is legally allowed to be done in certain countries and certain regions. For example, in Champagne, rosé, you are allowed to mix red and white wine to create a rosé, because it's so hard. As Delphine was saying, stability on rosé to get the color, and then to keep the color is difficult. And with bubbles, it makes it really difficult. So Champagne are actually allowed to blend red and white wine. I don't know if they can do that in Italy or other parts of France. I can't remember.
Well, you can do it, but for example, in our case, it's not allowed if you are wanting to make a DOC wine, like a Bardolino, for example. It's not allowed, but we can do it for sparkling, because for example, for Trento DOC, you can blend the Pinot Noir and Chardonnay exactly like in Champagne, or in Franciacorta, for example. So we can still do that for sparkling, like with Prosecco Rosé is another example. We can blend, But for still wine and for rosé, it's a bit more. There's a bit more restriction. But this is because this is due to the DOC and DOCG, for example, rules. So it depends. It depends
in France, in terms of blending red and white, is that allowed outside of Champagne?
No,
I didn't think it was. No. Okay, so then someone is asking, which grape, red or white, would you categorize rosé? Well, basically rosé is made from red grapes, but most red grapes have white pulp and white juice. So the color comes from the red grape skins. So to make a rosé, you need red grapes. Is that fair enough? Yeah, okay. So just lovely message of people saying thank you very much. Great to see a panel of ladies. Yes, we thought that was nice as well ourselves.
Definitely.
Someone's asking if you should decant rosé wine. What do you think of that, Delphine, decanting rosé?
I never do that, but why not actually? If it's to develop different aromas, it could be interesting on different type of rosé. Why not? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I decanted these, but only because I think they look pretty.
Yeah, exactly.
Stay in the garden on a table with nice salad. I think that.
Yeah. And do you find the nose is more open?
Yeah, I found when I decanted earlier, I found the nose a bit open.
Yeah.
And another thing, if you've got like a really traditional rosé, like Tondonia or something from Rioja, which is a really traditional food style of rosé, I think that could very well benefit from decanting, because it would really, I mean, this is Jean-Luc's wine, and it really is, it was aromatic in the first place, but I think the decanter probably does maybe just make it a bit fruitier.
Okay.
It's hard to say because these are all 2020s. They're all very fruity and forward on the aroma profile at the moment.
Yeah, maybe in 6 months' time would be a good moment to decant them, perhaps with a little bit more aging bottle.
Possibly, yes. So I think we've managed to get through all the questions. Thank you very much, ladies, for joining. It was really fun, and I think we got lots of interesting questions, and also just we got to chat in depth about Rosie, which was the whole point of the evening. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Lynne. It was a brilliant tasting, really. Very dynamic.
Good, thank you. And also to our lovely customers who joined us, because it's so nice to be here, and it's quite hard for us because we can't really speak to the customers, but I hope that they enjoyed the chat and hope they learned something about Rosie, enjoyed the wines and the food matches, and that we'll actually get some weather in Ireland to enjoy. And Delphine, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
The Languedoc and from the Vineyard and from Kildare, which is not nearly as glamorous. And thank you finally to the lovely O'Brien's team who are in the background making everything work and everything happen. So thanks very much to
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for having us and for your time, for all the customers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a lovely evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.